Hello again. This is Danielle Ralston, and I am an ADHD and autism coach, and also a Bible believing Christian. So, we're talking about how the church has failed us as neurodivergent women. So, the church really struggles to give us the support as ADHD and autistic women because it lacks understanding of neurodivergence in the first place, especially within a biblical framework. And it also lacks understanding and compassion many times for mental health. And as somebody as like me who is really really grounded in a really conservative um literal translation of the Bible as well as a compassionate approach, I really and somebody who's experienced this obviously, I really see where the church has failed us as women, especially as neurodivergent women. And I really hope that we can start changing this message and this can be a space to give you that support and that understanding that you need. So, how does the church fail us? They have rigid interpretations of what a behavioral norm is, like, and maybe even a legalistic interpretation of what the Bible says should be a behavioral norm. um they have a standard for behavior in many churches, and this isn't, and I don't care whether it's Christianity or something else. They have like these behavioral standards that they expect, and we, if anything, really buck against those systems quite a bit. And we struggle with social cues. We struggle with paying attention, sitting down for a 2 hour church service. We have sensory processing disorders, and all of those things in how we speak often in a really direct, very often can be seen as we're being disrespectful when we're just asking why. We want more information, not because we're questioning authority, but we just want more information. But we also seem disengaged because it's so hard for us to pay attention. Um, and we're just really misunderstood. And if there were better understanding for us, offering us grace and even teaching church leaders the differences for us with neurological differences, they could tap into those unique gifts that we all have. Um, but there's also most churches are really have insufficient support for mental health or actually don't believe in mental health support. I have to say, I'm one of those people, even yes, somebody with my training who says therapy a lot of times can be more damaging. Especially if you have a spiritual belief system in God specifically, um, because they buck against that system and there's a lot of disconnect between belief systems and things in mental health. So mental health has its own issues, but a lot of churches don't believe in that. They emphasize, well, just pray about it or have more faith. If you had more faith, you wouldn't be struggling with this issue. Yeah, but this is how God made us. I want to state something right now. We are not broken. We are beautifully and wonderfully made. Um, and we are made in God's image, which means even us who are, our brains are wired very differently than neurotypical people. Even someone who is born without an arm. Um, None of us are broken. I want you to know that you are not broken. You are differently wired than a good part of the population, which I actually believe is a whole lot less than you might think. Um, but we are not broken. And if you're not praying hard enough and you don't have enough faith, like, did you spend 5 hours in prayer on this or fast or all of these things that are just insane, especially when you're neurodivergent, to spend 4 hours praying about one thing. We don't pray the same as everybody else. That's not a bad thing. We don't worship the same as everybody else. That's not a bad thing. We don't have faith like everybody else because we have a very different way of thinking than the neurotypical person. And often churches just don't value any of that and don't support us in a way that is compatible with a biblically grounded life. And that's something that I'm trying to change in my part of the world. And I'm hoping to bring that to more and more people. The other thing that a lot of churches really focus on is an emphasis on quiet devotion. praying quietly in the background. Yeah, that's not me. One, I'm a verbal processor, so I'm gonna be loud about it. And two, I'm not my prayer times aren't a million years long. I actually have a formula I wrote. Well, actually Jesus wrote the formula and gave it to us. But I have a formula that I use for praying and I call it done, and it's 5 minutes or less, maybe 2 minutes. Um, and then my prayer is thinking about, oh, Sally down the road was really struggling. I hope she's doing better. God, can you take a look at her for me? And I walk on with my day. My prayer life does not look like somebody else's. Or I think in song. I think in music, I'm a musician. So when I am praying for a client or something going on, I often have a piece of music come to mind for them. There's nothing wrong with that. But the other part of all of this is the social engagement piece. We're expected to be social the way they want us to be social, in the format they want us to be social, in the container they want us to be social. And some of us, not me, I'm just putting that out there so y'all understand, um, don't are very introverted and don't like big groups, and they don't like to volunteer for this and go help do that because peopling is too much. And that's okay. That doesn't mean you're broken. That doesn't mean something's wrong with you. But the church is very unfriendly to us and doesn't foster ministry in our way, or it doesn't allow us to take the reins and foster ministry in our own way a lot of times. And where they're not creating opportunities for us to serve and do the thing that we were built to do. Many of us struggle with that in many, many churches. We're also dismissed because we're women. We feel silenced by the environment of church, again, for the other couple things I mentioned, but except the reason for this podcast. I got to stop calling it a podcast. This channel is to talk about how the church has dismissed our voices. There is a higher, just as high, if not higher, domestic violence statistics in the church, sexual abuse, sex trafficking, physical abuse, domestic violence, all of these things that I mentioned in the first episode are extremely high, if not higher than the world in the church. And in a way that dismisses our voices because we're traumatized by the church. We're told to sit down and shut up. We're told that we have no voice, that we're not smart enough, that we're not whatever. Do we have our place in our church? So I want to put this in here. There, women, you have a place in church, in the organization called church. Again, I don't believe in religion, but women do have a place in that. We are given a place. We are given instruction, and it's very, very clear, literal instruction in the Bible on this. Um, and many churches have gone off the wall and don't actually follow what's in the Bible, as far as women's and ability to serve in the church. And they're squashing our voices. They're not advocating and allowing us to be who we are and be the gifts that God has given us. And the church as a whole doesn't like our brand of living life for the most part. Just how I look now, many, many, many churches would not accept me the way I am now. My church, I show up on Sunday morning and they're like, "What color is your hair this week?" "Oh, that looks great." And other than mentioning that it's changed color again, there's no mention. Nobody cares. They know me, and it's the quality of my personality in me that matters to them, not how I look. That means I can show up in church in tank top and sweatpants and whatever I want, and nobody's going to judge me for that. And that is a big thing for me for sensory needs. Um, the other thing that really, really lacks in the church, and they haven't even been willing to discuss or go about fixing this, is lack of educational resources. How to raise a neurodivergent child, how to be a neurodivergent Christian, leading to a lot of misconceptions, really unhelpful, judgmental behavior towards us, and we need to open up the space for a biblical framework for neurodiversity and promoting and allowing us to be who we are and providing us that mental health support. So I want you to remember that I'm here to help start changing this message. And I hope, and if you are a church and a pastor listening to this, I would love to come in and speak to you as leadership, not as not and if you have trouble with a woman coming in, I've got men on my team who would do the same thing. Um, let's change the message. Let's give the neurodivergent women in your world a chance to speak.